Okay, so I have Emily Spooner with me, who's become a very good friend of mine. But Em, could you tell the people that listen to this a little bit about your background? Why I'm talking to you about being running ambulatory surgery centers and what it's like to bring a new product into them. But could you tell the people that are listening to this a little bit of your experience in different ambulatory surgery centers and what you've done and your business?
Absolutely. My name is Emily Spooner. I'm the founder and president of Marisa Consulting, a consulting firm to open ambulatory surgery centers, go through accreditation, do implement software, do just about anything and everything to maintain compliance at your center, either at the beginning of its journey or throughout the lifetime of the surgery center and risk management and really just any job at the surgery center, provide interim leadership and all of that. Um, and also, I am the director of surgical operations for Procision Software, which is an ambulatory surgery center software, and one of the owners of South Florida Same Day Surgery Center.
Oh,
And being able to do everything in a surgery center from start to finish over the last 22 years has been just an amazing experience. I have
yeah.
a huge passion for surgery centers, and it's probably why we get along so well. I have a strong
I,
opinion.
it, it is, and I also love like you've done everything in ambulatory surgery centers, and when I say everything, I literally mean like you've washed and sterilized instrument trays, to owned ambulatory surgery centers, to opened.
Hmm.
You've worked in different parts of the country. You've worked for big ambulatory surgery center organizations, and you've worked for and
And
owned an
on my
independent one.
own.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and
I have
so you have,
scrubbed
yeah,
instruments and scrubbed cases and
yeah.
and
You've
scrubbed
done
the walls.
everything.
So yes, I have literally done every
Yeah.
single job in the surgery
You
center, including scheduling
you
surgeries
eat
and billing.
yeah, you eat, sleep, and breathe ambulatory surgery centers, and it's why we get along so well. And it might be because we're both a little insane, right? Because we this is what we talk about all the time. But I
Definitely.
wanted to have you on here because we I'm trying to interview people like you who have this experience because my audience tends to be vendors, reps. Um, people often think of orthopedic and spine, but I would say all types, right?
Mhm.
What I wanted to do with this, with you and I discussing this, is talk about if I'm a rep and I came to your facility. Now, you and I we always joke you would like me as one of your reps, and I would love dealing with you, although you'd probably crush me on pricing. Um, but if I came to you and you don't know me, you don't know my company, and you don't know my product, but a surgeon in good standing in your facility has said, I'd like to use Copeland's, whatever it is, on a case coming up, right? So
I that would be the
there's no
preferable approach.
recognition.
That would be
Yeah.
the preferable approach. This, you know, good
Hmm.
surgeon that works regularly, part owner
Yeah.
of the surgery center, comes to me first and says, "Hey, Emily, this is a product that I would really like to bring in. This is how it would help. The rep has told me that the cost is this and this and this, and we get paid this and this and this."
Right.
And usually the surgeon has a little bit of the information. What is a little bit off putting is when the rep comes in first and is just like, "Hey, the surgeon said I could bring this in today, and we're using it right now." And
Right.
I don't
So
know you, and
note to
that's a
self.
problem.
Yeah, note to self, that's the wrong way to go about it. So, and I'll ask you in a little while. You'll probably explain why that's the wrong way to go about it. But what is the right way? So this surgeon has reached. Actually, you're saying the surgeon reaching out to you first is probably
Probably
preferable
ideal.
to right
Yes.
versus me coming in and saying he or she wants to use it. We don't have anything scheduled, right? But I
Mhm.
wanted to come in and introduce myself and tell you what he or she is thinking. Hopefully, they said something to you. So preferentially, it's the surgeon saying, "Hey, Em, I'm going to have Mark come reach out to you. I want to try this thing or use this or
Mhm.
whatever." Right. So that's the best way to do it. Okay. When I
Yeah.
do come in, regardless of how I come in, you and I are sitting there, and I'm telling you where he or that surgeon is coming, what their thought process is. You know them pretty well. What do you want to know from me right off the bat about this product? What's a couple of things that I should have ready to go?
The CPT codes, any other reimbursement codes, HCPCS codes, or any supply codes that need to go along with that. If you have the more data, the better. Like, how many of these cases is my surgeon doing? Is he using a similar
Hmm.
product to this already? Is this a replacement product for that product? Are you going to give me a free trial or 3 free trials? What are you going to do for me to be able to try
Hmm.
this?
Yeah.
Have you gone through the background check process? Have you checked in and been respectful to my staff? And also, what is this going to cost me? And as long as I
Right.
have the case costed already, then I should be able to know exactly at the time, what
And
my reimbursement
and
would be
okay,
based on the contract of the
that's helpful.
insurance of the
So,
patient.
right. Right. So
Mhm.
you said CPT, HCPCS. Sounds like vendor clearance or like sort of which we'll dive into in a second.
Mhm.
Costs, right?
Cost.
Oh, and does it replace something? Those are some of the things you were
Right.
thinking about
And the
because
volume,
again,
like the volume, like,
yeah. Oh,
can
and
you give
volume.
me a
Right. Right.
discount if we're doing this volume? What other places have tried this product? What other
Mm.
ASCs specifically? Where has this
Do you?
product been used in an ASC? Give me that
A,
ASC data, because if
okay.
I know that you have this
Okay.
ASC data, okay, then it can be profitable for me in my center. Like, that's from the get go.
Hmm. Okay. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. It's a reference, but for credibility, but it's also a reference for economic feasibility. We could call it, or it makes sense economically. Okay. So I come to you, I give you the pricing, I have all those things. And you said something there. If you have the case costed out, I think that's the way you described it. But
Mhm,
that's basically let's use an example. Let's use a knee arthroscope or something that's common. You do
mhm,
have that pretty much costed out these
mhm.
days
How much
because
a
you do
pack
it
or a general
commonly.
pack or an arthroscopic pack costs, all those basic IV supplies
Right.
and everything, what it costs for a patient to walk into your center. Yeah, you're gonna have those
Yeah.
basics down, so.
Right. Right. So that's pretty that's pretty straightforward. And I give you a price, and then you can say, assuming all those other boxes are checked, you
Mhm,
can say, okay, this works for us if we're doing it once or twice, and if we're going to be doing it a bunch, can you get me a better
mhm,
price?
mhm,
Because that's you know where your pricing is. And now, how do you? Here's something that you can give insight to reps. You have so many different contracts with so many different insurers that come in, so
mhm.
that this person's knee scope could be a private. This one could be a different private insurer. I mean, knee scope's
Right.
an example. It's most of that is not Medicare. Um, so, but you have to run that. Do you have to run that through? Um,
I would look at my payer mix. So if I have a
mm,
good
mm,
software platform, I'm able to look immediately for that CPT code, hopefully be able to have that case costed in your system and be able to see if it's replacing a product, even changing that out, what your case cost would be, but also
right.
what your volume is for a specific payer. So to know at least on average, okay, I'm doing 10 Medicare knee arthroscopes, but I'm doing 47 Blue Cross Blue Shield knee arthroscopes in a 6 month time period or something, then I'm going to know that, and what percentage am I going to use this product for these scopes? How often is it something that we use every single time? Is it, what's
Yeah.
that volume going to look like? But basically
Okay.
having a knowledge of what your payer mix is and what your average payer is versus your volume for that
Right. Okay.
procedure.
Yeah. So it's like a rule of thumb, although it
Right.
differs. Yeah. 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 Okay.
You
All right.
usually base everything on your Medicare rate, to be honest. You have to,
Do you?
because anything above and beyond, like I look at my case cost and then compare it to Medicare. Then, after to have a base case cost of like, this is what my base reimbursement is going to be. This is my smallest reimbursement.
Right, right. Your
Medicare,
lowest.
Medicaid.
It's like the worst case
Exactly.
scenario, and right.
Worst
So you
case
know if
scenario
you're
is
good
I'm only going to
there.
have $200 profit or whatever, something like that, that you're going to think a lot harder about using that product. it versus even if you have thousands of higher payers,
Right.
it
Right. Yeah.
you can't
But it
take that
is
chance. You could have like
right.
400 of these Medicare cases come in. You never know.
That's interesting. So, it's funny. I was helping a pretty well-known orthopedic company of some note. Um, and we were running sort of a pro forma on a product of theirs, and I ran it off of Medicare, even though it's one that's more in sports medicine and used. You're less
Hmm.
likely to have a Medicare patient in that, but
Hmm.
still used it. And it's funny. I'm glad to hear what you just said because it cements in my head I'm doing the right thing as well because I was
Hmm.
telling the company, they're like, do we need to use Medicare?
Yes.
Um, and I was like, I don't know, but it's the worst case scenario. And I know if the pro forma shows were profitable there, then we're comfortable that we're going to be profitable in the private payers. And
And
here you turn around and tell me that's exactly what you do too. So that makes
yeah,
me happy, right?
exactly
Because
what I
I'm
do. Exactly what I do.
yeah, yeah,
And I mean, with Medicare, you also have to assume that they're probably not going to cover your implant. So whatever that CPT reimbursement's going to
it,
be is
it's
what your
right out of that,
reimbursement's going
right?
to be. So if you're
Yeah,
getting an implant cost or some carve out done with a private payer or something, that's even more profit in your pocket. Yeah, absolutely. But you have to look at Medicare for sure.
hmm, okay, that's interesting. Could you just shed a little bit of light on what you said there, which I knew, like when I would talk, Emily, when I talk to you, these things come up, and then I start asking you a bunch of questions, and they're not necessarily on some like agenda or whatever. But you said that some of them don't, like Medicare doesn't cover the cost of the implant. You know that because that's not the way they do it. They almost do it like they do it as a
Right.
basically here's your payment, you
Hmm.
figure it out, kind of, right?
Exactly.
Right?
And
I mean,
there's zero
that's not what they
negotiation
say.
there. So
Yeah, yeah,
and it
yeah.
doesn't matter if you have to use an implant that costs this or that, you have to figure that out what with your CPT, what that's going to actually be covered, what that procedure is actually going to be covered at, because it's a lot harder to get anything like that. And it's just in rare cases that you do get
Yeah.
that covered.
So some of the private insurers though, they pay not only higher, but they pay differently, right? So you're saying
Yeah. So
you
they pay a
mentioned earlier
percentage
that
of Medicare typically is what your contract's going to be with a private payer or commercial insurance. But also you could get, a 55% reimbursement rate for the implant if you submit an invoice. Things
okay,
like that. Or you can carve out certain procedures and say, hey, I know that every single time I do this knee arthroscope, I am going to use this implant. And so this is my cost, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and this is my volume. And so can you pay me at a higher rate for this? Because uh, I need to carve out this supply
hmm.
that has to go with this every single time. It makes
Do you-
more sense in like urology procedures, GYN procedures, but also in ortho procedures. You need certain plates and screws to be able to do the things that you need to do. So you're able to, especially if you have like a large volume of those type of procedures, to go back to your insurance companies and build those carve outs into your contract.
and are you is Emily Spooner doing this on her own with these insurers? Like, are
As
you
an
the one that's
admin,
negotiating this with them? Yeah.
it really just depends on if you are involved in that process in your center. If you are
Hmm.
involved in the insurance contracting and really the back end part of the office billing and the revenue cycle management, if you have a revenue cycle, an RCM company, more than likely they're negotiating insurance contracts for you. A lot of times that's included in
Oh,
your contract. If you're part of a management company, they're gonna
they're doing that.
negotiate those rates on a higher level. In these one-off small independent centers, absolutely you can negotiate those carve outs. And me
Wow, that's
personally, I've absolutely done it.
this is why again, you've scrubbed cases, you've sterilized instruments, you've owned ASCs, you've negotiated with insurers. Like this is why, to me, and I suspect to people, you're so fascinating because you have such a broad experience, and I love it. Um, okay, so uh, um, talk to me about, if you would. Gosh, this is fascinating. Could you talk to me about the due diligence you do on? Remember, I'm you don't you don't know me, you don't know my product, you don't know my company, right? And I've given you, hey, these ambulatory surgery centers use it. Here are the CPT codes. Here's the HCPCS codes. Here's um here's the
Medicare
volume,
reimbursement
right?
rates.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
sort of given you all that stuff that you just that first sort of tranche of information that you want.
Hmm.
The next part is like you. I assume you look my company up. Do you go to like a mod website for FDA, or do you go to the OIG? Like, what's that like? What do you do for that, or do you have time to do that,
Well, it
or
depends,
is that part of
how
vendor
it comes to
clearance?
me. But if that's really part of vendor clearance. So
Mm,
typically in centers, if they do have rep tracks or something similar to that, they can log right into that in their office into rep tracks and look up your company right there. They can look
okay.
you up. You can
Hmm.
see if you're compliant. If you're going to other ASCs, if you're going to hospitals, more than likely you're going to be in rep tracks.
Right.
So
Right.
even
Yeah. Oh,
if your
yeah. There.
credentials are expired because like, oh, you have a new product, so now you're back out in the field again, you're going to have some kind of background in rep tracks. So that's the first place I would go personally. And then I would go to LinkedIn.
And then what? What was that? I'm sorry.
I would
Where?
go to LinkedIn.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. So yeah. So you're doing both formal and informal, or formal background is being done usually by your vendor clearance, but you can jump right in and take a look at it. Um, and I know the answer to this because you told me when we were off air. But what is the reason? What's the rationale that vendor clearance helps you? Because I know you need to know why. You need to know everyone that's in your building, particularly around involved in patient care. And I mean that's just good common sense. But
So
why do you
this,
have to do it? You don't have a choice, even if you thought it wasn't.
yeah, CMS guidelines say that you have to track visitors in your center that have any contact with patients. So if you have any reps that are going to be around any patients, number one, you want to make sure that they're going to keep that PHI, their patients' health history
Hmm.
safe and secure and abide by HIPAA. When you are registered with RepTrax, you sign a form that says that I am going to abide by HIPAA at every single one of these centers. There's a
Yeah.
whole credentialing process that so you know the rules and regulations of how an ambulatory surgery center works. We know that you know what a sterile field is. So having a background like that is really the first step.
Yeah.
Um, knowing that a company is reputable, even if
Right.
I've never heard of you ever before. But they do the background check, as in, like, they are going to check to see if there's been violations from, Medicare violations with this product, with this company,
Hmm.
weird reimbursement violations. If there's been lawsuits with this, I'm able to see really they've done a lot of background already for me. So,
Yeah. And so that you don't have to. I
right.
mean, like, right, right, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so let's go. It's fast. Let's go back to the economic side of this, if you can, for a minute, right? So, because this is the part that most of my vendor rep friends and colleagues tend to struggle with, um, which is you get reimbursed for a procedure blank $1,000, right? And so what I find our audience doesn't always know is hospitals get reimbursed at a different rate. Hospital outpatient gets reimbursed at a different rate. And then ambulatory surgery centers get reimbursed. And I know it's a sore subject. I think it
Mhm.
probably should be. But
50 cents
like,
on the dollar.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny you knew it right off the top of your head.
Mhm.
And site neutrality, I know is a discussion that I'm fascinated. I just follow because it's interesting to me, and it really makes no sense the way we have it set up now. But economically, so I bring this thing in, and you get. I'm making this up. You're getting reimbursed $6,000 from Medicare for the procedure, and my implant costs $1,800 for whatever. Making up a number, but like, do you have a percentage where it has to be? Obviously, it's got to be below the full reimbursement. But is there a generally accepted number that that implant or that whatever is used is part of
Percentage
that
above
final?
cost.
Yeah, yeah. Like how do you have that in your head, or do you have that? Is there a general rule of thumb? I mean,
You know,
companies can't necessarily pay attention to it, but I'm just
right.
curious.
I mean, if you're a multi-specialty center, you should know at least how much it costs for your patient to check in at the front desk, be checked in at pre-op, that pre-admission phone call, more or less how long that takes, the time that they're in pre-op and their IV start kit and their linens, and you should know exactly how much it costs for a patient to come in. Now, other than that, your preference card is going to tell you what your cost is. And like I said, if you have a good software system, you're able to know, okay, without this, with this Medicare rate, this is exactly what I'm going to be able to get. The percentage really depends on the procedure.
Hmm.
It really depends
Yeah.
on the procedure. And
Okay.
the difficulty of the procedure, the risk of the procedure, these are things that you also have to take into account. Are
Right.
we doing these procedures on these very, very unhealthy patients? And, you really have to think about all of those risks, not just the cost risk, but the other things also.
So that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way. So can you give me an example of where you had to think about that because you were getting more complex patients in, and that look, you and I both know the more complex patient is going to take more time, more anesthesia, more blood loss, more pre and post op
Hmm.
care. Like, they just do, right? So and
Yeah.
that immediately means it costs
I
you
mean,
more,
now
right?
I feel like it's a touchy
Do you have an
subject
example of
in
that
the
too?
ASC world about retina and eyes and cataracts and things like that.
Mm,
Now they're not going to be doing them in the hospital, or they don't do them in the hospital. Retina is really hard to find where anyone's doing that. So you really have to think about the risk. These patients are not healthy patients. A
mm-mm.
lot of
No,
times are not healthy. They are retina patients. That's what you will hear in an ASC. Oh, those are retina patients. Those are risky patients. So you have to think a lot about that cost. It costs a lot to do those cases. With the reimbursement being so low, they'd be like, okay, let's not do retina in my center, you
right.
know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
even
Which,
there may be a small percentage of and you're really helping a patient population. It just depends on if you and your docs want to take that risk.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be realistic. We're all in this to help patients. We're all in, honestly, like we really are, although it doesn't feel like that all the
Absolutely.
time. But there are business decisions that have to be made that,
Hmm.
you can help, you want to help everybody you can, but you can't help everybody and lose money on them all the time.
Hmm.
And if they're complex, and those patients tend to be complex because they tend to be 75, 80 years old, diabetic, brittle. Well, then you can walk right through the whole list: cardiac issues, right?
Right.
And it doesn't mean they don't need retina care, but it makes them
Right.
very complex. Uh, um,
Complex. And if
I-
my margin's $200, what is the risk? The risk is so great to do that whole specialty in general. I am all for it. I am all want to help the patients. I've done retinas in centers, and it's very, very helpful for the patient, but I can also see why a center would choose to say no to that specialty.
yeah, yeah. So so that's fascinating. Let me come back to the rep again. Rep comes
Yeah.
in, brings all that stuff, brings all the information. Do should they have done a pro forma for you, or do you consider that part of that, or is it like, or do you kind of already have it in place?
There's two companies out there. Obviously, I'm not going to name any names, but that have
Mm,
come in with a sheet that has been the most helpful for me. It is
really?
This is where it's paid in a hospital. This is where it's paid at an HOPD. This is what it's paid at an ASC rate. These are the CPT, and this is the Medicare reimbursement. You're giving me the Medicare reimbursement. I don't have to go to my Medicare fee schedule and look up that reimbursement. It's all right there. This is what the physician is getting paid specifically to do this procedure, his pro fee, and this is what my ASC facility fee is, and if I'm going to be getting any other reimbursement for the actual implant. whether
Right.
that's a
Right.
Medicare payer or commercial payer. But a one-page sheet that lays it all out there for me, don't give me a whole folder of stuff I'm not gonna read. Like, I just want one sheet that literally has it, like, in a colorful Excel spreadsheet that I can look at that tells me
Yes,
everything right
that you can look
there.
at.
Then all I have to do is look at what my case cost is and be like, yes, this makes sense, and let me talk about this further, or no, I'm sorry, this doesn't make any sense to me. I need some more data.
Right. Okay. It's that. So it's basically the reimbursement in CPT and the HICS picks, but it's the
Mhm.
CPT codes and the Medicare reimbursement in those across those three different sites.
Yeah. I mean, my
Um,
admin, as an admin, you're going to know what surgeons are doing those types of cases. You should know,
right. Right.
even if
Um,
your rep doesn't know. Although it's
yeah.
the more data, the better. They've already talked to
Yeah.
four
Well.
different surgeons in your center, not just the one surgeon. I'm going to have multiple surgeons using this. This is actually going to save us money. Like there's lots of scenarios where you're going to get into my center way faster
Yeah.
if you're going to
Yeah.
save
Yeah.
me
I
money
can hear you. I hear
from
you
a product
laughing.
I'm already using.
So that is important. The more surgeons that are willing to use it, that is something you want to know, and you'd
Yes.
want to know the truth. So if I come in and
Yes.
say, "Hey, listen, I got one surgeon who's asked for it, right?" Or I got five that have
Absolutely.
said they want to use it. That's you want to know that. Okay,
Yeah. Let me
and
tell you, I had 29 cataract surgeons at a specific facility, and each one of them had their own trays. And each one of them had their own supplies they wanted to use. Don't come and talk to me about a different something or other for eyes. I don't want to talk about it. So, yeah, if you have, 10 of your cataract surgeons want to use this product, then I'm going to probably sit down and have a conversation with you. So, that would be
yeah,
my
yeah, and
advice
okay,
definitely to
I
vendors is,
like
hey,
that.
go find out what other surgeons are practicing at my center and go talk to them and see if they would be willing to use it too.
Hmm, hmm. It's it's not always that easy, but I do
Oh, I
think
know.
it's a good
I
move.
know.
Yeah, you know, I know you know.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, so all right, then do so when they come to you with these things, and back to your reimbursement form. So if they came to you with, here's our costs, here are the physicians who are interested, here's the volume we think,
Mhm.
and then here's the reimbursements. That's a really good place to start because you can
Absolutely.
then do some economic understanding and
Mhm.
say, hey, this actually would work for us. I have to make sure you're in vendor clearance and all that stuff, but like, and that you're reputable as a vendor.
Mhm.
But it's really not much more than that from at that perspective for you at least to make a decision. Or I
Right.
mean, am I missing anything?
Um,
Hmm.
Another thing is, do you have to be there for this placement to happen as a rep? Is this
Mm.
something where you're gonna have to be here every time? Is your schedule going to work with our schedule? Are we, is this something we have to process in just depending on what the device is, there's a lot more
Yep.
questions that would have to happen after that. How much is this gonna cost me to sterilize in my center? Or if it's something
Right.
that has to be sterilized or something that has to be reprocessed, you know? Tell me about that.
You and I,
Yeah.
you and I have had so many of those discussions. So okay, then tell me how your brain works on this. I come in and say, hey, listen, here's my product. It costs $100 more than the one you're using now per procedure. And you're like, oof. Immediately, Emily's like, I don't really like
Mm,
that.
you're
And I
gonna have to
say,
get down to my price.
well, but I say, hold on now. Don't start coming at me just yet. I say, yeah, but we take, I don't know, I'm going to make a number up. We take 15 minutes on average off of the procedure. And let's say, for
Mm,
argument's sake, I know you're going to want me to prove it, but let's say I'm credible and I prove it, right? And you say,
mhm,
wow, it's $100 more, but it does save 15 minutes or
mhm,
decreases like a staff member, something that's a
mhm.
cost, but it's not necessarily
A
that hard
supply
cost of, right,
associated
right.
cost,
Yeah.
correct,
So
yeah.
how do you look at that? Because that's one of those things that this is where people start to get like this is not an easy discussion to have, right?
It's
But
not.
how
I
do
mean,
you
it's
look
really
at it?
knowing as an admin, knowing how much it costs for each, on average, what your staffing is costing per hour to have a full staff, to be a skeleton staff, what that costs for your staff per patient. So
Yeah.
that is involved in your case costing. There are formulas that you are able to plug in numbers of how many staff you have that is touching each patient to be able to realize what your actual cost is for that staffing. So absolutely, 15 minutes,
Mm,
maybe, you can get it down to where I'm going to do this knee arthroscope in 45 minutes in my this OR, or 25 minutes or whatever, but then I have to think about
right.
anesthesia time, before and after time. But you should be able to know what your hour would be worth in an OR
Right.
for a knee arthroscope.
Okay. So yeah, so it's like all right, that because that's where these things start to come up, which is
Mhm.
I know like we're let's say again, we can prove we're faster and we can prove it's significant. It's not 14 seconds, it's 14
Right.
minutes or whatever, right? Like
Right.
and then how do you put a value on that? And how do you look at it? And you just described it. But what that's not what you always hear in hospitals. You hear from people, "Well, it doesn't matter," like blah blah blah. And I tell reps, "You're talking to the wrong person. You're not high enough because the
Yeah.
higher you go, the
What
people
if
that
you're
run
doing
it, and
20
that's
of
what you
those a day and you're saving
right,
15 minutes on 20 procedures a day? I mean, you have
yeah,
to, it just depends on what your volume is. If people aren't looking at what the volume is and versus the time, then they're not making the
yeah,
right economic
yeah.
decisions.
And it's all I know is it's valuable.
Time
The question
is
always becomes,
money in an ASC. Time is money. It
okay,
is.
so that's a reasonable position for me to come in. Now you may still go, I beat me up more, and I still
Right.
try to get you the price right because Emily's going to beat me up, and I'm a rep, and I really want the business, so I'm gonna hard negotiate hard, but I
Or
am
you're
going to
gonna
get
give
her.
me a
Let's
couple
let's
free
just go for it.
ones. You're gonna give me a couple free ones.
See, I don't even have a product I'm selling you, and you're already squeezing me, but which I love. But that's okay. This is exactly what we're talking about. Time is money, and it is valuable, and you have to put a value on it as a rep
And if it's something
and
like that,
as an
I would
admin.
need to actually see that. Like, yeah,
Right?
see it.
You'd
I
need
don't need
proof.
to hear data from some other place. I need actual data that this is going to
Yeah,
happen here. Yeah.
yeah. But that's on us. Like that's not
Mhm.
your job to
Right.
believe what we say. It's our job to prove it to your
Mhm.
level of satisfaction. And
Definitely.
sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's easy. But you'll laugh at this. You'd be amazed. How many reps and companies? I mean, I talk to them all the time. They're like, "We're way faster. We're so much faster that it's almost we're like Flash Gordon." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. So let's write down. Let's say how fast. How much faster do you think you are?" And all of a sudden they get religion. They're like, "Well, it's kind of hard to put a." I'm like, "Well, which is it?" They're like, and I'm not saying you're not faster, but when we say we're faster, and somebody's like, "Okay, cool. How much faster?" We do need to have an answer,
Give
and
me the
maybe
data,
we've measured
man.
it,
Give me the
right?
data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. This is so. Now, look, and I still I could talk to you every single day, all day long, because this stuff fascinates me. Is there anything though that if you could tell every rep, like if you spoke to every rep that ultimately comes into one of your ASCs or comes into an ASC with a new product, whether it's a big company whose name you know, or somebody that like off the times it's me when I've been coming into places. No, I was coming with new and innovative small companies that nobody ever knew. Right? Doesn't matter though. What what do you want? What would you tell those folks to say if you just did these couple of things? It would really make our lives as administrators and people who run and own ASCs easier and better, and you'd be viewed as a strategic partner or a better vendor, whatever it is. Like, is there any advice you would give people, vendors, vendors specifically?
Like I did mention off air earlier, I, as an administrator, hope I don't know more about, number one, your product. I don't want to know more about your company than you do. I don't want to know anything more about this product than you do. You need to come in with that data for me. that is where the respect is lost, to be honest.
Mm.
And I am probably a tough critic, but more than likely, I'm probably already going to know what CPT codes they belong to and all of these things. So if you don't have your stuff in order, then how can I expect you to bring in a new product to my center
Hmm.
and it
That's a
go
credibility
smoothly?
discussion. Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a credibility and frankly professionalism discussion.
Exactly.
Right?
Hmm.
Right? And I will tell you, it sort of saddens me that that's what you're describing, because that indicates that you're not getting that as much as you should, which tells me, right, like that the field is maturing, but it's not there
Hmm.
yet. The sales vendor field, it's just we've always been clinical, clinical, clinical. Like we could go soup the nuts on spine, issues. But like then you say, okay, well, I need the CPT codes, and if I stand there and go, huh, like I look like a dope. I'm not, but
Just
I
turn
look like
right
one
back
because I
around and walk back
right.
out and
But
get me
please
that
leave.
data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Come back to
it's
me when you've
funny,
got your stuff together.
and it's funny. A
So,
lot of companies do have that stuff, but they don't most of the time. I shouldn't say they don't train the reps on how to use it. And what you just described is how they should be using it. They should be walking
yeah,
in with it and saying, Emily, my name is Mark, and here's the information you're going to need and expect from me.
yeah.
Here it is, right?
And
This is awesome. Oh,
don't try and like weasel your way
I know.
around. You know exactly what I mean. I don't know how to describe that without using swear words, but you know, don't talk around me. Respect me and the knowledge that I have. That is very important
Yeah,
too. As an
yeah.
ASC administrator, my position, don't come in here and disrespect me and say the surgeon said so, so we're doing it. That's also incredibly important. And it's happened to me
Yeah.
plenty. So,
I, I
respect,
believe you.
mutual respect. And by having the data, you're respecting my position to, and it's not my job to gather that data.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
need you to bring in whatever you can. And I feel like the vendor companies need to provide their reps with ASC training so they know how an ASC workflow works, how an ASC credentialing process works, how getting a new vendor. I mean, we also, a CMS guideline is that you have to show your vendors for whatever product that you buy at your center.
Hmm.
Have to be able to
Yeah.
be willing to show them about every single product that you purchase at your center.
You have to show that. You have to be able to show that to CMS. Is that what you're saying?
To CMS, to your
Hmm.
accreditor. Yes.
I see there.
So I
I
don't
honestly
want
didn't know that.
some, Tom, Dick, and Harry to come in and bring something that's going to contaminate any of my surgery center in any way, shape, or form.
So, just out of curiosity, this is the last question I'll bug you on. But there's, can I ask you about the structure of the leadership of an ambulatory surgery center? There's a board.
Mhm.
There's a director of nursing usually. No, I mean I know the titles change a little bit, but I'm going to use that, and then you can correct me
Yeah.
on it. There's an administrator, right?
Hmm.
Um, what what how does each how does each work together to run a successful ambulatory surgery center?
Well,
What's the
the
role?
governing
What's the DO
body, so
ends
there's
role?
usually a governing
Hmm.
body where you're going to try and include, especially if you're a multi-specialty center, one person from every specialty. You're going to meet quarterly. This is all CMS guidelines. And then from there, the medical director also is part of that management team. So you're going administrator number one, DON, medical director, all very, very similar, depending on the structure
Hmm.
and the organizational chart. And then you also have typically a business office manager. Now, these are all going to take part in whether or not that vendor is going to come, because the billing office
Okay.
manager, they could be doing everything from accounts receivable to accounts payable. So they may know what's going on with how much things are costing, what your actual reimbursement may be different from what I know as an admin. So pulling everyone in on that discussion is, and the director of nursing is like, no, I've heard from other people this and this. Let's do some more research on this, on the clinical side of it. Or,
Okay.
Emily, I mean, I'm not going to say what happens in the back sometimes, but they're like, Emily,
No.
no, we shouldn't be using this product. So that has
Okay.
come on the clinical side before. So, or the director, the medical director, depending on the involvement that they have in day-to-day operations or how much they're actually at the center. But if you have a medical director that's really involved, they're going to be very involved in that process.
Okay.
And then it
Yeah.
may or
Okay.
may not, depending on the structure, have to go back to the governing body, or it could be something that you can approve, depending on what your policy and procedures are and what your medical bylaws are. You can say, we can push this through at this level, or it has to go up after a certain
This
price
has to
point
go to
to
the,
this level.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, for example, like a software would go through potentially a different process in that group versus an implant for like a knee arthroscopy, right? So,
Yeah.
because they're maybe different pricing or they're different they're fundamentally different. They
Yeah,
might have a different process.
definitely.
So
Usually one
imagine,
involves a contract,
right, right,
and you
okay,
could do
we're
one-offs with an implant without a contract.
right. Does it differ if I'm the rep? Where should I still start at with the administrator, regardless of which one it is? Like if it's an implant,
Mhm.
or if it's a software, or if it's like the sterilization stuff I sold for years. You're the person I should be coming into to talk about your facility, correct? Or
Yes.
would it be the DON? Or okay,
Yes. Based on the structure of the center, but more than likely the administrator or the
yeah,
facility director or whatever they call them, CEO, if you can start there. But if you have, let's say, a CEO that's running multiple centers or an administrator that's running maybe more than one center or running a clinic or something like that, and the DON is really doing the day-to-day operations of your surgery center, then you're going to look at that structure and that's where you're going to go. So it just depends on where
hmm,
the structure is, but most of the time your admin is going to be there and be your
yeah. Well,
point
generally
person.
speaking, and my having been in sales for a long time, if you go and the administrator is like, "Hey, it's not me, it's actually the DON,"
Right,
you go see the
right,
DON, right? But like,
right.
yeah, you're never wrong
Hmm.
starting with the administrator. You may not be right, but you're never wrong by doing it. Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's funny. Thank you as always for getting on and talking to
You're
us about this,
welcome.
because I
It's my
swear to you,
pleasure. I love
it
it.
it demystifies. Like I was sitting there going like, the business person. I'm like, I think I know what they do. I know what they do,
Yeah,
but I
they're
better hear what
coding,
I
they're
better hear what Emily
billing.
says.
They're coding, they're
Yeah,
billing. They could be part of your materials management process and purchasing. You don't
right.
really know what they are. Yeah,
Yeah.
depending,
Well,
every center is going to be different. If you've seen one center, you've seen one center. That's my favorite thing to say. My favorite quote,
yeah.
because that's the absolute truth.